So even though we're like a week into October, I really wanted to go through my reading wrap up for September because I just read not a lot of books, but I read some books that I really, really loved. I started off the month with The Kiss of Deception, and this is the first book in, I think it's called The Remnant Chronicles. It's by Mary E. Pearson, and I wanted to read this because it is a trilogy that is interconnected, or it comes before the Dance of Thieves, Vow of Thieves duology, which I read earlier this year and loved. I loved that series. And the first book follows this princess, Leah, and she is getting set up in an arranged marriage, but she decides to run away. And she runs away with, I guess, like her handmaid. And there are two people kind of like hunting her down, looking for her. One is an assassin from another territory, and the other is the prince that she's supposed to have this arranged marriage with. And I don't know how to describe this book without it being a spoiler, but there was a crazy plot twist in it, and I actually had to like sit there and rearrange like all the information that I had. It was really good. It felt slower than Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves. I definitely liked that series more. I ended up giving the book a 3-star because it was fun, but it didn't have that same like Dance of Thieves like 5-star feeling. After that, I finished the audiobook for The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez, and man, I was not expecting that book to be the way it was. It was a pretty sad story. Well, like the story itself wasn't sad, but there was a really, really sad part in it that I was not expecting. But the story follows two main characters, and they are the maid of honor and the best man in their friends' weddings. They meet and they kind of like each other, but the female main character is seeing somebody in the military who's in active duty at the moment, so they just become friends despite kind of liking each other but not knowing what the other one's feeling. And yeah, things just kind of happen. I think I gave that one a 3.5 because it was really good. I like Abby Jimenez's romance books because they feel similar to me as like to Emily Henry books, where there's romance, but there's a lot of plot that is not solely romance based. And I think that makes like a romance book so much more compelling when there's more like real life stuff happening within a romance book, and it's not just like only romance. And I think she does a great job of balancing that, kind of like Emily Henry does. So I'm excited to read more of her books. I actually got the second book in that like series where it follows another character that we meet in the first one. Next I read The Brothers Hawthorne, and this book has not been really well received from what I've seen of it. And I don't know if it has to do with like people's expectations for this book. And I love the Inheritance Games. I love it so much. It is like a comfort read for me. It is one of the series that really got me into reading. So I'm a little delusional when it comes to the ratings, so take it with a grain of salt. I did give this 5 stars when I read it. Is this realistically a 5-star read? But this is a 5-star series for me, and I'll always eat it up. I will say this definitely was not like my favorite book in the series, but it was fun. I enjoyed getting to see more of the characters, and I think it is leading up to what the next book will be, and I think it's a good stepping stone. I think it'd be very hard to go from the Inheritance Games to what the next book, The Grandest Game, is supposed to be. So I think this probably did a good job of being the middleman. It's kind of like that second book syndrome, except this is a standalone. That might be linking one series to another or just a series to another standalone. But it follows Grayson and Jameson while they deal with their own personal struggles. Jameson is finally interacting with his father, and there's a lot of chaos that ensues from that. His father needs him to help him with something, to do something for him, and he deals with a lot of struggles that he has with like the way he views himself and his self-worth. And Grayson is interacting with his family on his dad's side. He's interacting with his sisters, getting to know them, struggling with like having the secret he's keeping from them. And it was really fun, and I liked getting to see their point of view. One of my biggest complaints is that we don't have more of Xander and Ash, but mostly I wanted more Xander in this. He is the best comedic relief. Next, I audiobooked Ace of Shades, which is a trilogy by Amanda Foody, and I loved this. This whole book series, it was so fun. It was really interesting. It's kind of a mix between like fantasy world and like mobs. So in this world, there like people have like two talents. They'll have like a main talent and then like a split talent. And this female main character goes to, in my mind, like the capital, this island capital or whatever of this world they live in. And there's like the north side, which is kind of like the rich and proper side, like all the politics is there. And then the south side, which is kind of run by different gangs. And the male main character is like the head of one of the gangs, the Irons. And the female main character goes to this place trying to find her mom, who went there for a work trip but hasn't come back when she should have been back. And she was left a note from her mother that if she wasn't back, she should go look for the male main character. And it was such a great book. It took me like a little bit to get into it because when you're doing the world building, especially like while listening to an audiobook and driving, it can be like a little hard to get into it. But once I was into it, I was into it. The first book was so good. Like the connection between the female main character and the male main character was done so well. Like I cared about them so much. It was just such a fun read. And basically like the point of this first book is finding her mother and dealing with this like magical game where you try to avoid death and you kind of like play for your life. And it was so good. Also the audiobook for it was really good too. Yeah, just like no complaints. I was like instantly obsessed with it. I was like, why don't more people talk about this? I feel like I'm not doing it justice, but it was so good. But next I read House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I am trying to get more into thrillers, and this one, it didn't disappoint. It was not what I was expecting. And I don't want to go into too much detail about that because I think it will definitely be a spoiler, but this was not quite what I was expecting when I started this book. This book follows the female main character whose husband has recently passed away in the last year, and she's on like house arrest, not from her mom, because she's been drinking too much. Her mom puts her on like house arrest at their lake house so she can like recuperate and work on herself. And she's a little lonely there, and she ends up kind of stalking the people who live across the lake with the binoculars because the neighbors across the lake, their house is just like made out of windows, and something happens to the wife and she tries to figure out what happened to her, if the wife is still alive, if it has something to do with the husband, where the wife is. And it was good. I would read more Riley Sager books after reading this, and I I liked it overall, even though there was stuff I wasn't quite expecting, and it's not normally something I would go for, but I still liked it in the end. Plus, it doesn't hurt that he quotes Taylor Swift in like the dedication or whatever you want to call it. So I enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 4-star. It wasn't like my favorite thriller. My favorite thriller is still His and Hers by Alice Sweeney, but I'm glad I found another thriller book I like by somebody other than Alice Sweeney, because that was all I had going for me. Next, I finished the audiobook for King of Fools, which is the second book in the Ace of Shades series, and that one was a 5-star. A 5-star. This one brought in another POV, the male main character's best friend, Jack, who I love. It's always like the best friend characters that are just like the sweetest, so it was really nice to get his point of view in the second book as well. It's so hard to talk about series because I don't want to spoil what happened in the first book, but it's covering the fallout of the crazy events that happened at the end of the first book, and the female main character and figuring out her role in this new society that she's a part of, in this new territory. She was like a school girl in high society, and she now has to acclimate to this very different society. And the second book was definitely my favorite. Amanda Fitty, writes some heartbreaking books, though. I feel like, why are like YA books like more tragic than like adult books? I don't know, but 5 stars for this one. Next, I read A Deadly Education. I love this book and this series. If you have not read this book, if you've had any inclination that you want to read this book, please go out and get it and read this book. It is not a very long book. It is just over 300 pages, but I loved it so much. It took me 60 pages to get into it. It is kind of hard to start because it's a lot of telling and not like showing. Like, the first 20 pages of this book, nothing was happening. We were just receiving information. So it was kind of hard at times, but the payoff was so good. These people, they have magic. I guess they're like wizards, and they have to like build up their quantity of magic that they can pull from to do spells and do magic, but they have to build up like their supply of magic. And they're in this school, the Scholomance. It's called the Scholomance series, and you follow this main character, Elle, and she is an outcast. She was told that she was going to accomplish bad things, pretty much, that she was like gonna destroy the society that they know of because her grandmother was like a seer or something, and that was her prediction. So she's lived with this fear of using her power for evil because she is like a really powerful wizard. And we're following her. She's an oddball. Nobody really likes her. She's not nice to people. She could be a difficult to like female main character, but she's honestly just so funny. You don't care. I love Gal. And this school is in the void, and it is magical. And there are, I guess you could describe them as demons or monsters that try to kill the students in this school because they're attracted to the power that like young wizards hold. And that's why all these parents send their kids to the Scholomance in the Void, because it's supposed to be like a higher protection from these monsters and demons. But the school is basically like trying to kill them, or that's how it's like described. At least that's how I viewed it. Like, the school has a mind of its own. Like, there's no teacher. Like, this school would provide them with assignments and take in their assignments and grade them and whatnot. But I don't know how to describe it. It was so interesting to read. Like, before bed, you would have to put all these wards over your room to protect yourself, like, during the night. And Gal has these issues with the male main character, Orion, because Orion is also pretty powerful, and he has spent like the last 3 years saving all these students by killing like the demons and the monsters. He's just like really good at that, and he saves her life for like a second time, and she is just so fed up with him because she's looking for the opportunity to demonstrate like how powerful she is so she can make alliances with the other students, because once you finish your like senior year there, you have to go through graduation, which is this escape in like the basement where there's all these like mouths and monsters and demons, and you and your alliance try to fight them off and run to safety. So yeah, that's the first book in this series, is her dealing with Orion, what is going on with the school. But there's so much that's good about this book, because like the plot is so interesting, and like the setting of the school was just so fascinating and like fun to read about. But the characters are written and developed in such a lovely way. I want to read more books by Naomi Novik. I'm sold on her. I adored this. I cannot tell you how much. I gave this a 4.25, and I probably could have given this like a 5-star because I just loved it. But the beginning was hard to get into. Next, I read Yours Truly, another Abby Jimenez book. I told you I liked her writing. I went back for more. And this did not disappoint. I think this is my new favorite romance book. I like devoured this. I finished it in 24 hours. It is a 5-star, and I don't know how to like pinpoint exactly what it is, because my favorite romance book prior to this was Book Lovers, and I think I loved Book Lovers so much because I really like connected with the character Nora in Book Lovers, where I didn't like feel that with this, but I just loved them so much and the things that they were dealing with in real life and overcoming personally, and it was just fantastic. And it follows the female main character who is a doctor at the same hospital from the first book, and she's up for this big promotion, and there's a new doctor, the male main character, and he is also up for the promotion, and things, you know, do not start off well between them. He is someone who struggles with anxiety, and they do not get off on the right foot. Eventually, they talk to each other again and kind of work things out a little bit, and he decides to write her a letter explaining like what had happened between them, and that he struggles with anxiety, and like apologizing in this sweet handwritten letter. So they start writing letters like back and forth to each other in the hospital, and things kind of just go from there. But lovely, sweet, amazing book. Read this. After that little romance break, I went back to the Shulman series and read The Last Graduate. So this book starts off with their senior year. Something kind of crazy happened at the end of the last book, and they are figuring what is going on in the outside world and what is going on at the school, because things with this magical school are not right. And I really don't know how else to talk about this book other than the ending of this book. The last line, I was so mad, because normally when I read series, I like to have all the books on hand because I'm really bad like that. I will buy the whole series more often than not. I didn't for this book. And with the last like 2 lines of this book, I was mad I had to wait a whole day to get the last one. It was so good. I gave this one a 5-star. I'm so sad like I'm done with this book series. I loved everything about it, and this was my favorite one. Next, I finished the audiobook for the last book in the Ace of Shades series, which was Queen of Volts. This one took me a little longer to get through. It was the longest one out of all the audiobooks for sure. And what's interesting is there were a lot more point of views in this one. There were like 5 point of views in this one. And something really crazy happened at the end of the second book. And this third book is about a new deadly game, which might be a bit of a spoiler, but I feel like it's vague enough where it's okay to say. There is this new deadly game, and they're trying to figure out how to either break the game to take it down, How to Play the Game and Survive. Yeah, I guess those are really the only two options, but it was a really good book. I gave this one a 4-star just because I think I liked the premise of the first two books just a little bit more. But it was really so interesting to read. There was a lot of like back and forth, switching sides, like who to trust. So if like those kind of things intrigue you, like you would probably really like this series like I did. And then I finished another series, The Golden Enclaves, the last book in the Scholomance series. It's so nice because they got like longer. Honestly, not by much. This one is only like 380 pages and I'm like, wow, it's so much longer than like the first one, which was just barely 300. But this book, like, I can't say anything because this is book 3 in a series, and like telling you what's going on with this is like just so much spoilers. It is so, like, I can't even say like one thing about this book, except I guess you learn a lot more of like the backstory to some of the characters in this book. You learn about their families, their upbringing. Read this book. Read this whole series. Next, I read my first reread. This is the first book I've reread, and I did some of it by audiobook, but I did finish it up, physical copy, and that is Foul Lady Fortune, because Foul Heart Huntsman came out in September, and I wanted to refresh my memory on this. So the first time I read this book, I gave it a 4.5, and I was obsessed with it. I am still obsessed with it. Rosalind and Orion, I know, another Orion, how funny, right? They are like my favorite couple, I've decided. I love them so much. And I like honestly needed to reread this book to remember how much I loved them. Their like banter, their personalities are like amazing, and like this isn't primarily a romance book, but I just love them. But the premise of this book is really interesting. Rosalind, the female main character, was sick, and somebody did some medical experiments with her, and she can no longer die. If she gets cut or shot, her body just heals over it really, really quickly. And she's never aging, she can't die, and she doesn't sleep. So she becomes an assassin for the Nationalists. This takes place in Shanghai in the 1930s, I believe. And Orion, the male main character, is also a spy for the Nationalists, but yeah, he's a spy, not an assassin. But both of them get paired together to be spies, even though that's not really what Rosalind does. And they infiltrate this company that is supposedly helping the Japanese invade and take over Shanghai, and it's their job to get information and like help stop it. Also because they believe this company is working with the Japanese on some killings that are going on. And it's just so good. Like, the espionage aspect was so fun. I had never really read a book like that, so I was obsessed with that. I was obsessed with them. This was so good. When I reread it, I rated it a 5 stars, which it definitely should have been from the start, because I was like thinking about this book, and I just love them. 5 stars, please read. And then of course, I finished off with Foul Heart Huntsman. I'm very sad for this to end because, like I said, I'm obsessed with them. And this book takes off with like the craziness that happened at the end of Foul Lady Fortune. I would also recommend reading the duology that comes in between this, but this book wraps up like the whole, both duologies, the Secret Shanghai series. I thought it did a good job. I enjoyed the first half of this book a little bit more, because the second half of this book was like a lot of fighting and war, and in my opinion like didn't focus as much on the characters as like the first half of the book did. But I still really loved this book. I gave it a 4.5. It was a great way to end, and I luckily have the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, so that came with like an extra like chapter at the end, which definitely helped me out because I was sad about this ending. But once again, I read this I read this really quick, so maybe that like skewed my opinion on things. Maybe the second half wouldn't have felt like so war based, but I read like the second half of this like in one sitting. It was bad, but still really recommend. But Foul Lady Fortune was superior in my opinion. Those were the 13 books I read in September. It was like a lot of fantasy, but honestly I'm really proud for the 2 romance books I read because I hadn't been reading a lot of romance. But let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think about them. And please, if you do anything, read A Deadly Education. Just like power through the first 60 pages, you won't regret it. So good. A contender for like one of my favorite books of the year, even though it's not a 5-star. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, because like I felt like I couldn't give it a 5-star because I really struggled in the beginning, and I like really bad, but I just love it so much. Anyways, I have a lot of releases coming out in October, so we'll see what I get through this month. Thanks for watching.